It's time to focus on seniors with Helping Seniors TV. The television show designed to make you aware of senior issues and needs, as well as to acquaint you with the resources available to help you age in place and with dignity. Now, here's your host, Joe Steckler.
I'm Joe Steckler, and welcome to Helping Seniors, the television arm of Helping Seniors of Brevard County. Our show is designed to provide you with information on how to develop your own aging and care plans. Our topic today is civil law. And joining me is Mark Cook, attorney. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, Joe.
It's a long time. I'm sitting here looking at you level-eyed. Many years ago, I used to look at you sitting up on a bench, but you weren't a judge. You were a county commissioner.
County commissioner back then.
Yeah.
I always hated that facility, too, for that reason. It was built where the commissioner sat way up high, and you had to go down to a pit to speak to people.
That's exactly right. I sometimes I look at what government does, and I don't want to demean government or want to do anything like that. But sometimes I think people that we elect tend to forget that they have a responsibility to all the citizens that elected them.
Right.
And sometimes we just get too wrapped around the axle handle and we forget what are some of the very simple things that people have to live with.
Exactly, because you're inundated with special interests, quite frankly, on a daily basis, and administrative staff who has their own agenda. And you can lose sight of what you're supposed to be doing, which is serving the taxpayer.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen.
And it's interesting because almost every attorney I've had on these television shows over the years I've been doing it, and we've done close to 500 shows.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Almost all the attorneys have either been elder law attorneys or really attorneys that specialize in senior care.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting, it's you deal in the area of civil law.
That's correct, yeah.
And so many people will say, well, I'm going to go sue that person. I don't like what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's what we call civil law as opposed to criminal law.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's the two distinct areas of the law, and I don't do criminal, but I do civil. And I guess if I were a doctor, you might say I'm a general practitioner in a sense, but I only do civil law, which really civil law is based on relationships between people, basically, when you boil it down to agreements, contracts, different types of areas of law. I do Social Security, disability appeals. I do unemployment compensation appeals. I do contract law. I do civil litigation, and also wills and stuff. I deal in that area too, and probate. So I've got a diverse practice.
Okay, let's talk about one word you just mentioned, wills.
Mm-hmm.
I always talk about, when I talk with Bill Johnson, an elder law attorney, we always talk about the importance of people that live in another state when they come to the state of Florida. What should they do because of changes in Florida law recently? It just what does a person come around and say, what do they have to do? What should they do?
Well, if they've moved to Florida on a permanent basis, then they really need to see a Florida attorney and have their will reviewed, which is not very expensive to do that, and see if they need to adjust the will or have a new will. If they're going to be permanent residents of the state of Florida, so it'll be probated in Florida and not be an out-of-state will. So, and like I said, that the cost of that's not prohibitive to have an attorney that works in that area to review it. And it's very important to have a will. It's surprising how many people, and some of them older people, who've never really taken the time to do a will, and they have real assets. And they just never have gotten around to it. And it's important to get a will done. and to see an attorney to do it. I mean, you can do it online or something like that, but for the cost difference, seeing an attorney, somebody you can speak to eye to eye, someone you can speak to and ask questions and make sure that your wishes are being fulfilled, you need to have a will. If you don't have one, go out and seek an attorney. It doesn't have to be me. It could be any attorney who deals in that, but it's important to have a will.
Well, I think it's also important that people understand the value of going to the right person to take care of their business.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You're not going to go to a dentist for a back problem, and you're not going to go to a podiatrist to get a tooth filled.
Exactly, and
maybe if you lived out west 100 years ago, that might happen. But
yeah, in fact, I got to get some dental work myself later in the week.
It's not going to happen today. It shouldn't happen.
Right.
But I was also given to understand that, well, let's say if a will made in the state of Maine, and a family comes and lives in Florida on a permanent basis, and that will is nobody ever touches it. Is that will still valid in the state of Florida, or what happened several years ago that said that something has to be done that will?
Yeah, there's different things you can do, and by the way, just so your audience knows, don't rely on my legal advice. This is general information. And before you act upon anything that I say with regard to the law,
I understand that.
Well, I have to give the disclaimer. Make sure that you consult a professional because everybody's case is different, and so. But in a general parameter, you can also do a codicil to a will, which is essentially amending a will. Sometimes you have someone that you thought was going to be in Florida, they're called personal representatives. In most states, they're called executors of the will.
Right.
But in Florida, we call them personal representatives because that's the way the legislature decided to do it. And you may want to change that at some point. Or that person may pass away, or that person may not be available. You need to come back in and either do a new will or do a codicil to the will or amend a will and name somebody else as your executor or your personal representative. And things that people sometimes just don't do, because it's not pleasant to think about a will sometimes, but we all end up in the same place.
We're all going to die.
We're all going to pass away. Yeah.
Right.
So it's good to go in and talk to an attorney and just see where you're at and if you haven't had your will reviewed in several years. Go back to the attorney who did the will, or if they're no longer available, or if you did the will, especially if you did the will yourself, you should have it reviewed by an attorney.
Yeah, I try to advocate. Anytime I talk to an attorney, I talk about that and talk about a durable power of attorney. Mm-hmm. I happen to be a very, very big believer in the durable power of attorney, and I think it's very safe to say that you can go to Office Depot and get one. But,
sure. Yeah.
But when you go in the case of a durable power of attorney, everything that you specifically want to have done has to be listed in that power of attorney.
Yes.
In a durable power.
Right, and I've seen people that it turns out that they did it over the internet, or they did it, and then when the time comes, they have to use it. It doesn't cover the things that it should cover with regard to the power of attorney, and that's why you need to have a real power of attorney and have it reviewed by an attorney.
Yeah, and I strongly recommend it that everybody has a durable power of attorney because a durable power of attorney succeeds dementia loss. If you have that durable power of attorney in place, and let's say the husband becomes forgetful and no longer has the power to make a decision, if they have the durable power of attorney in place, the wife then has the power to do what needs to be done to make the decisions.
Yeah, a few years ago, they added a requirement that there'd be some medical documentation on that, and as well. And another thing, end of life decisions. When I do wills, we ask if people would like a living will, or if they'd like to go ahead at the same time and make those type of decisions with regard to end of life decisions. So.
But you mentioned, when I did my research, I decided I better stay away from some of that stuff that I was picking up on the internet, because civil law, it can be quite interesting, and a lot of people don't understand the litigation part of it. Perhaps you could.
Civil law. There are a couple of types of civil law. And if, for instance, if it's just a small dispute between two people, which is less than $5,000 or $5,000, you can actually go to small claims court, and you can do that on your own, what we call pro se or pro se, and or you can have an attorney if you feel more comfortable advocating for you, and go to small claims up to $5,000, and then after that. You have county court, and then you have circuit court for things in excess of $15,000 disputes, where people have loaned money and they're claiming they haven't been paid and so forth. So, but I enjoy civil law. I think everybody comes in my office. What I try to do is, even if I can't help them, I try to point them in the right direction. I try to give them some value for coming in. I evaluate their case, and maybe sometimes I tell people, yes, I can't do that, or it's not something that I do, but I always try to refer them to somebody or some organization that may be able to assist them. And it's interesting to me because everybody has a story, and when you go through, and to them, it's very personal, because they're the ones involved in the conflict. And so I'm a mediator too, a Supreme Court certified mediator. So I'm used to trying to mediate conflicts and work out settlements, and so I think that's very important too. That you have someone that can actually point you in the right direction, even if they can't help you.
When I was putting the show together, I never came across the word mediator, and I know that. There are several attorneys in town that practice simple mediation. Mm-hmm. They try to keep people from going to a divorce or going into a divorce process, or they try to keep them from suing another person. Mm-hmm. And that's, do you do that type of thing too?
Yes. In fact,
how does that work?
Well, in the county, I for almost 7 years was a volunteer for our county mediation, and in the county, the judges would send almost every case at the pretrial conference to mediation in order to see if it could be settled prior to having to have a trial, because obviously a trial is more expensive, number one, time consuming, and the court dockets are very full. So basically you go to a mediator, and a mediator is a neutral. They're not an advocate for either side, and you make that very clear at the beginning that you're not advocating for one side or the other, but you're really there to facilitate if a settlement or if an agreement can be reached between the parties, because otherwise it goes to trial, which becomes where you have one person's going to make the decision, if it's a bench trial anyway, where the judge is going to decide who's right and who's wrong. So a lot of times it's very beneficial to have a mediation and resolve the issue before you have to do that.
I thought it was, in my notes here I had here when I was talking about when you litigate, you mediate settlements, and you resolve, and you arbitrate. And you do a lot of those. The words are kind of thrown out, but I came across one interesting statistic, and it said that 99% of the cases never reach trial.
Yeah, and thank goodness, at least the judges believe I'll say that because of the fact that the dockets, if they so many cases weren't settled, the problem would be it would take you years to get a trial date. So the fact that you can settle most of them is a big help to the system, and a big help to keeping the courts open to people. But people do have the right, though, if they want to go to trial in mediation, they can say we come to something called impasse. Where one side just says no, I'm not going to negotiate. I'm not going to, and I want to go to trial, and that is their right as a citizen to do that. And at that point,
I'm not going to go to trial.
Yeah. Oh no, just say they want to.
Oh, okay.
So if you can't reach a agreement in mediation, then the next step would be to go to trial.
I was involved in a lawsuit one time, and we settled. And I got what I asked for, and so I was pleased. But as I look back on it, I don't think that the law was served correctly. And I won't go into it on television, but it's just like with you. But when you get this nagging thought, Mark, about whether or not I did the right thing, and I would. What has been your experience in working with people when you acted as a mediator, or served as on the side of the litigator, where you're trying to advise a person whether to accept or decline? It's got to be a tremendous process of self-thinking, inner thinking.
Oh, yes. And ultimately it's up to the client. Of course, the client is the decision maker because it's their life and their money and what they want to accept. But I use litigation as the last resort. When somebody comes into my office and they talk to me about a situation, I always try to recommend that we try to settle it without litigation. Number one, litigation becomes very expensive to the client. Sometimes you can recoup what you've spent on the back end if you win, but there's no guarantee of that. But but that does happen. But I use litigation as a last resort. It's not the first resort, and maybe that's the mediator in me. But I try to do that as a last resort.
I think what you're saying is that you are trying to do the best you can in the interest of the client you're trying to serve, but you have an obligation. If you're an honest attorney, you have an obligation to tell the person you're serving, hey, you're either right or you're wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and
that's one thing.
It's got to be a hard call.
That sometimes it is difficult because people are convinced that something is right, and sometimes you have to tell them where the law is just not on your side. I mean, and if to prosecute this case, you have to like any litigation, you have to weigh the pros and the cons. And figure out how far you can go, and sometimes it's difficult.
Well, can you go to a judge? Let's say you got an area civil on. You're representing somebody's on the other side. You got two attorneys working against each. Above them is the mediator sit?
Well, in between them, yeah. It's usually in a room like this that you mediate. Yeah.
Okay. Can a mediator, who acts as a mediator? Another attorney?
They can be attorneys, and county mediators, you don't have to be an attorney, but you do have to take the training in order to be certified by the Supreme Court as a mediator. And so a lot of them are attorneys, but you don't have to be.
So the attorneys then would have to accept the decision of the mediator.
Well, see, the mediator really doesn't make a decision. Mediator only facilitates
He helps
an
the attorneys
agreement.
make decisions?
Exactly. The two parties that are in conflict. So the mediator is not like a judge because they're not going to make a decision, but they try to facilitate an agreement between the two parties, and then they send that agreement to the judge to ratify.
Lord goodness, if we've got that many, if we think in terms of 100% and 99% think of the hard work that attorneys are doing that we probably never hear about, never think about.
Right.
We only hear about the court cases.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, attorneys do a lot more than go to court, right?
It would behoove it probably if there's a lot of money involved, and I'm thinking now of cases that have come to us, and I get involved in this all the time with senior citizens that get it where the children feel that, and it happens so many times in a second marriage, where the children of one or the other spouse doesn't maybe just simply did not want their parent to get married or remarried.
Right.
And it's the party that gets married business. It shouldn't be the kids.
Yeah.
If I was going to do that, I would make sure that I had something in place that my children could never interfere with what I wanted to do with my second wife.
It's your life, right?
It's your life. It's your wife. But parents don't put these safeguards in place. And so then when the children perceive that one of the parents is not treating the other one the way they think they should be treated, or they don't like something, they start filing for guardianships, and judges, they award these guardianships based on some pretty flimsy evidence at times. And 'cause I've not been involved in it. I wouldn't say that, but
Yeah,
I've been to mediators. So.
Yeah, I don't do guardianships, but yes, I'm aware of what you're saying, and that's true. So it can get very dicey, and you hope the person, who's being petitioned for, that they have a legal counsel that can defend their rights and advocate for them.
Okay. The other thing that when I sent the show over to you, you said you wanted a good thing that we've talked for just a minute or two about fraud for seniors.
Yeah, that's a big thing. In fact, some people I've known since I was a kid, I grew up here in Brevard County, were just victimized or almost victimized by someone calling them, and they're elderly people, and that their grandson had been picked up. Their grandson lives out of state, and that their grandson has been picked up for DUI. And that this person pretended to be a lawyer who was at the courthouse and wanted them to send money to bail out the grandson.
Right.
And they almost did it because it sounded so legitimate. Thank goodness they called me, and then they called their son, who's also a friend of mine. And we were able to dissuade them from doing that. But yeah, and then eventually they got a hold of the grandson, found out the whole thing was bogus. So if the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, certainly has a senior fraud division, and if you think you've been a victim, or if you think someone you know, it behooves you to go ahead and report that.
Who do they report it to?
Well, if you go online to the Attorney General's office, there is actually a form and that you can fill out to report consumer fraud. Good
point, because my wife has received, I'm going to just read from the notes she's given me. She's received 3 calls from the same woman, or it could be a recording. And Terry doesn't answer the phone, but the number the call came on is a 407 number, and every time the message comes in, they leave the same number to call. But my wife will not call this number back because she believes that if people with all this pilching going on, and that's the word what this stuff is called, she reported it to one number. But going online to the Attorney General's office, I guess more people need to report this woman, because woman sounds very serious, very gentle. But she's always telling, the one thing that they tell us to call is Social Security and IRS. The IRS does not call you.
No.
How many times we have to say that or write it or get people to believe it?
Right. And if anybody's asking for any kind of money or other stuff, I mean, that should be a red flag to everybody. Because government agencies don't do that. And you can also ask them to communicate in writing, So.
It was I had the other part of it, I think, is elder abuse, and that is
Yeah, that's something, and there's an elder abuse hotline. I used to be a DCF. One of my prior lives, I was a DCF, a child abuse investigator, and there's a hotline for that, of course. But there's also a separate hotline for elder abuse. So if you or someone you may know you think is being victimized by family or friends or caretaker, there is a number you can call.
Yeah, and the sad part about it, the majority of the victimization occurs by family members.
Yes, unfortunately, that's
unfortunately,
true.
The majority is. Mm-hmm. When people have asked me, Mark, about what I should do, I tell them, and it's a hard call. I've done it myself, and I told the person, I said, if you continue to do what you're doing, and I don't think what you're doing is right, I'm going to turn you in for self-abuse. The person kept doing it. I called the elder abuse hotline. It took 2 hours for an investigator to call me back and go visit that person within 2 hours. That's how fast they react.
Fast.
Yeah, it is fast. And
they take it serious when you report it.
Yes, they do. And I had another person that was sold an automobile to a dementia person, and I made mention of that. And I got a pretty nasty phone call from the car dealer. I said, hey, look, I told you what I was going to do if you didn't give them their money back. Well, they gave them their money back.
Right, they were smart. Right.
Well, they gave it back after they got
after they tried to take advantage of someone. Yes. Right, yeah. And there's a lot of that goes on with seniors, and it's sad, really, it really is. But it's something that you have to be vigilant and be on the lookout for.
You said the right word. With that thought, I want to thank you for being on the show, Mark.
My pleasure.
I want to thank you, viewer, for watching today's episode of Helping Seniors. I hope you got something out of it. I have enjoyed it myself. Thank you, Mark. I'm Joe Steckler. Thank you for joining our program today. I'd like to remind you that our senior information line is available to you at 321-473-7770. There you can get help and direction that could be helpful for your specific situation or circumstances. The work of helping seniors is very important, but we can't do it alone. That is why our sponsors here in Brevard County are so important. I'd like to thank our many area sponsors, businesses, and medical providers who support the mission of helping seniors that help us carry the cost of our media efforts. If you'd like to join us either as a business partner or simply donate as an individual, we would welcome your call at 321-473-7770. You are always welcome to visit our website at www.helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. Thanks so much for your help. It does make a difference.